Welcome to Excel for Beginners, the Jumpstart course. It doesn't matter if you've never touched a spreadsheet or only opened Excel by mistake. Stay with me and you'll be moving around with total confidence. By the time you finish this course, you'll glide through the grid, clean messy data in seconds, let Excel handle the math with simple formulas and powerhouse functions like sum, turn raw numbers into clear, colorful charts, and export a polished report that looks sharp on paper or PDF. Everything we cover works in any version of Excel, from Microsoft 365 to older desktop editions. So whatever's on your screen, you're set. Stick around to the final lesson for instructions on how to earn a resume-ready certificate you can showcase on LinkedIn. And if anything feels fuzzy along the way, hit the comments. I answer every single question, no exceptions. Ready? Let's dive in. The moment Excel loads, it lands on the Start screen, a friendly dashboard that lists any spreadsheets you have recently opened, and more importantly for someone new, a big thumbnail that reads Blank Workbook. That blank option is the clean slate where you will practice. So give it a single click or simply press Ctrl-N on your keyboard. And Excel instantly creates a fresh, empty workbook and drops you into Sheet 1, ready to explore. Just next to the blank choice, you will see colorful templates for budgets, calendars, and invoices. You can type into the search box or hit the More Templates button to browse them later. But for now, just stick with the blank canvas. Before typing anything at all, let's decode the screen so it feels familiar. In Excel, you always have at least one sheet. Notice the little tab labeled Sheet 1 in the lower left corner? And you can add more sheets by hitting the small plus sign beside that tab. When you see several sheet tabs lined up together, the entire collection is called a workbook. It can hold a single sheet or dozens of them, depending on your project. Each sheet is laid out like a giant grid made of thin gray lines that carve the space into columns and rows. Columns run vertically and carry letters across the top edge, A, B, C, all the way past Z into AA, AB, and beyond. Rows run horizontally down the left side and carry numbers 1, 2, 3, continuing well past 1 million. Wherever a column and a row meet, you get a little rectangle called a cell. Click any cell and it becomes the active cell, framed by a green outline so you can always see where you are about to type. For instance, click where column E intersects row 10 and you have made cell E10 active. Click where column F meets row 8 and that is cell F8 because each location can be named with its column letter and row number. Excel can keep track of billions of cells. Yes, over 17 billion in a single workbook, which opens the door to formulas that refer to precise spots, no matter how large your sheet becomes. Sometimes you need to work with more than one cell at a time. So, you click once on the first cell, hold the mouse button, drag diagonally, and release when the selection reaches the last cell you need. The block you just highlighted is called Arrange. Imagine you start in cell D4, drag to cell J14, and let go. Excel shades everything from the upper left corner to the lower right corner, and that entire rectangle is referred to as the range D4 through J14. The colon in the middle is Excel's shorthand for through. Ranges make it easy to format, copy, or analyze clusters of data all at once, and you will use them constantly. Now that the grid itself feels less mysterious, look at the top of the window. Across that top edge runs a row of tabs: Home, Insert, Page Layout, Formulas, Data, Review, View, and possibly others depending on your version. The Home tab opens by default because it contains everyday tools like bold text, cell color, and number formatting. But click the Insert tab, and the buttons below instantly shift to show charts, pictures, and tables. Click Formulas, and you see function shortcuts. Click View, and you see options for switching how the sheet is displayed. The strip of buttons under each tab is called the ribbon, and every ribbon is divided into small labeled groups, separated by vertical lines. For example, on the Insert ribbon, you might spot a Charts group, a Tables group, a Comments group, and so on. Some groups have a tiny diagonal arrow in their corner. This is a Launch button, sometimes called a dialog launcher. And clicking that arrow pops open an extra panel loaded with more settings that could not fit on the main ribbon. Moving your eyes to the right side of the window, you will find the vertical scroll bar, which you can drag up or down to travel quickly through long sheets. Directly beneath the grid, you will see a horizontal scroll bar that slides left or right to reveal columns that do not fit on screen. In the bottom right corner of the status bar sits a handy zoom slider. Drag the knob toward the plus sign to magnify everything for easier reading, or move it toward the minus sign to see more rows and columns at once. The data itself never changes, only how large it appears. Beside the zoom slider are view buttons that snap the sheet into normal view, the everyday setting, page break preview, useful before printing, or page layout, which shows how pages will look on paper. Now swing back to the upper left corner of the worksheet, where a small box displays the address of your active cell. That box is called the name box, and right now it probably reads A1 because Excel always starts you in the top left cell. If you click E10, you will see the name box change to E10, giving you constant confirmation of your position. Later, you will learn that you can type a cell or range reference right into the name box and press Enter to jump there instantly. Just above the ribbon sits the Quick Access toolbar. On a brand new installation, it shows Save, Undo, and Redo icons, but you can add your own favorite commands. Perhaps AutoSum, Print, Preview, or even the classic Quick Print, so the tools you use most are never more than one click away. At the very top center is the title bar displaying the current file name. Fresh workbooks are called Book 1 until you save them with something more meaningful. On the far right side of the title bar is the Close button, shaped like an X. Click it to exit Excel, or if multiple files are open, to close just the active workbook. Beneath the ribbon lies one more important strip, known as the formula bar. Whenever you enter or edit data or create a formula, the content appears both inside the cell and in the formula bar, giving you a roomy place to review or tweak long calculations without squinting at the tiny grid cell. Because you now recognize the basics like columns, rows, cells, the ribbon, sheet tabs, and the formula bar, you already understand more of Excel's workspace than most casual users. And you haven't even typed a single number yet. To wrap up this first hands-on practice, let's save your file, which turns the blank playground into something you can reopen later. Move to the upper left, click File, or use the shortcut Ctrl+S. And because this is the first save, Excel opens the Save As dialog. Pick a familiar location, like Documents, so the file is easy to find again. Type a clear name such as Excel for Beginners Practice, and press the big Save button. In a blink, the title bar updates to show your chosen name, confirming the workbook now lives safely on your computer. That single act, creating a blank workbook, learning its anatomy, exploring the layout, and saving it, sets you up for every future lesson. Typing data, building formulas, generating charts, and sharing polished sheets with colleagues. You have taken your first real step towards spreadsheets fluency, and from here, the only way is forward, one confident click at a time. This chapter focuses entirely on how to enter, correct, and manage the information that lives inside each cell, which is, after all, where your spreadsheet earned its keep. Imagine you've just joined a small business, and your first assignment is to build a payroll sheet. Column A will hold employee ID numbers, column B, the employee names, and the remaining columns will track hourly wages, hours worked, taxable income, and anything else your manager wants at a glance. The very first rule of data entry in Excel is the mantra, select to effect. Nothing happens until you click the precise cell you intend to change. I'll start by clicking once on A1, making it the active cell, and I'll type 1 for the first employee's ID. The value appears instantly, but it isn't truly committed until I tap Enter or Return on a Mac. As soon as I press the key, Excel locks the value into A1 and slides the active cell border down to A2, inviting me to type 2, then enter 3, enter 4, enter 5, and so on. Manually, pounding out a long series like that gets old fast, so we enlist one of Excel's best time savers, the AutoFill handle. Because the pattern is simply add 1 each time, I drag through A1 to A4 so Excel can see the progression. Then hover over the tiny green square in the lower right corner of the selection until my pointer turns into a solid black plus. Holding the mouse button, I pull that black plus sign straight down to row 70. When I let go, Excel extends that series flawlessly, filling A5 through A70 with 5, 6, 7, and so on. No typing required. Now I click once on B1 to affect that cell and enter the first employee's name. Press Enter, type the second name in B2, and continue. Midway through, I realize I typed JAMS instead of James. If I single-click on the cell and start typing, I'll overwrite the entire entry, which isn't what I want. Instead, I double-click B3. That action drops the insertion cursor inside the text, letting me arrow over to the mistyped spot and fix only the missing E. After correcting it, Enter locks in the change. When data entry marches downward by default, navigating opposite directions matters. Shift plus Enter moves the active cell up 1 row. Tab moves 1 column to the right. Shift plus Tab heads left. I'll tab to C1 and enter Julia's hourly wage. Let's start at 15 and tab again to D1 to enter her 160 hours worked this month. Instead of retyping 15 for every employee, I copy it once and let AutoFill do the heavy lifting. Though selecting C1 and pressing Ctrl plus C copies the value. The Home tab ribbon button or a right-click copy works too, but keyboard shortcuts are faster. I could just paste with Ctrl plus V into every cell beneath, yet dragging the fill handle is quicker. Excel treats the single cell as a pattern of repeat this exact number and fills the entire range down in seconds. Suppose Amelia earns more, say $17.25 per hour. Single-clicking her wage cell and typing the new figure overwrites the old one instantly. Occasionally, you need a full erase, data, formatting, hyperlinks, everything. Select the target cells, head to Home, Editing, Clear, the eraser icon with a dropdown. Then choose Clear All. If you change your mind, Ctrl plus Z undoes the wipe. Spreadsheets often feel confusing when column titles are missing, so let's insert a header row. Right-click the row 1 header and choose Insert. Excel pushes all data down and gives you a fresh row 1. In A1, type Employee ID. Press Tab, enter name in B1, tab to C1, and type hourly wage, tap to D1 for hours worked, and finish E1 with taxable income. Pressing Enter completes the row. Some headers overflow their columns. Hourly wage spills past column C. So auto-size them efficiently. Drag across the column letters A through E to highlight the set. Then double-click the line between any two letters, for example, between B and C. Excel measures the widest entry in each column and adjusts the width perfectly in one move. If the company bumps standard pay from 15 to 15.5, Find and Replace updates everything in seconds. On the Home ribbon, click the magnifying glass drop-down in the Editing group and choose Replace. Or press Ctrl+H to keep hands on the keyboard. Type 15 in Find What, 15.5 in Replace With. Hit Replace All, and Excel reports how many changes it made, maybe 70, including one hiccup. Employee ID 15 also changed to 15.5. That's easily fixed by typing 15 back into A16. Now, copying, cutting, and moving data. Select any wage, press Ctrl+C to copy, or Ctrl+X to cut. Navigate to a new cell and press Ctrl+V to paste. Excel duplicates or relocates the value accordingly. For a drag and drop move, single-click a cell or range. Hover over its edge until the pointer becomes a four-headed arrow. Then drag to the target location and release. If you misplace something, Ctrl+Z rescues you. Those same mechanics work for ranges. After selecting, drag the border to relocate the entire block, and Excel leaves the original spot blank. Finally, clearing away rookie mistakes sometimes means inserting columns on the fly. Right-click Column D, choose Insert, and a blank column appears to the left of D, now E. Undo with Ctrl+C if needed. Whether you're extending ID sequences, correcting typos from inside a cell, resizing columns en masse, or bulk replacing wages, every technique you've practiced in this segment emphasizes precision and speed. Select first, then Effect, setting you up perfectly for the calculations and formatting tricks coming in the third chapter of our Excel for Beginners complete course. In this segment, we're diving into formulas in Excel, which are one of the most powerful features of this tool. Let's say, for example, I need to calculate the total taxable income for each employee in a payroll spreadsheet. The way to do this manually would be to multiply each employee's wage by the number of hours they worked. And while I could calculate this using a calculator or in my head, that's exactly what Excel does best. Excel is not just a spreadsheet tool. It also acts as a calculator with all the functions and operators needed to do these kinds of calculations built right in. So in cell E2, I'm going to create my first formula. When creating a formula, you always need to start by typing the equal sign. Now, when I first started using Excel, this confused me a bit. But then I remembered something from algebra class. You know how in algebra you learn about equations like x equals y plus 10 divided by 3? That's essentially what we're doing here. So in Excel, when I type equals, I'm telling Excel that whatever comes next will be the formula that defines the contents of that cell. So in cell E2, I'll type equals, and then I can either type the numbers directly, like 13.9 times 158, or I can reference the cells instead of typing the numbers, which is much better. So I'll type equals C2 times D2 and hit Enter. And there you go. Excel will calculate the taxable income for Julia. This is much better than typing the numbers in directly because now the formula is dynamic. If I change the value in cell C2 or D2, the taxable income in E2 will automatically update. This is one of the reasons why using cell references is superior. It makes the formula flexible, and as you add more data, it adjusts accordingly. Now, instead of typing cell references manually, another option is simply to click on the cells you want to reference. So instead of typing C2 times D2, I'll click on cell C2, type an asterisk for multiplication, and then click on cell D2 and hit Enter. Excel will do the same thing, but I'm using the mouse to select the cells, which makes it quicker and easier. Once I press Enter, I'll see the result. But it's important to note that if I double-click on cell E2, I can see that what's actually in the cell is not the number, but the formula I entered. This is important because it shows you how Excel is actually working behind the scenes. It looks like the contents of E2 are just a number, but it's actually the result of a formula. Next, let's talk about the type of cell references we're using. In this case, the formula uses relative references. That means that when I reference C2 and D2, Excel is interpreting that as multiply whatever is in the cell 2 to the left, C2, by whatever is in the cell 1 to the left, D2. This is why when I use the AutoFill handle to drag the formula down the spreadsheet, Excel automatically adjusts the references for each new row. For example, in the next row, the formula will refer to C3 and B3, then C4 and B4, and so on. This is because relative references automatically adjust as you copy or move them. The AutoFill handle is a great way to copy formulas without having to re-enter them manually. In fact, if you're working with a column of data, instead of dragging the AutoFill handle down, you can simply double-click it, and Excel will automatically extend the formula all the way down the column. This is much quicker and more efficient, especially if you have a large data set. The reason this works is because Excel recognizes that the formula is using relative references, so it adjusts the cell references based on the row. Now let's say I want to calculate the taxes owed for each employee. If the tax rate is 7%, I would enter that value in cell H1 as 0.07, and then use a formula to multiply the taxable income by this tax rate. In cell F2, I would type equals E2 times H1, which will calculate the tax based on the taxable income in E2 and the tax rate in H1. When I hit Enter, I get the correct result. But when I use the AutoFill handle to copy the formula down the column, it doesn't work correctly. The reason it fails is because the formula is using relative references. So when I copy the formula down, it adjusts the references for H1 to H2, H3, etc. But I want H1 to remain constant. To fix this, I need to turn H1 into an absolute reference by adding dollar signs in front of the column letter and row number, so it becomes $H1, $1. Now, when I copy the formula down the column, the tax rate in H1 will stay fixed, and the formula will calculate the taxes based on the correct reference. This brings us to an important concept: the difference between relative and absolute references. A relative reference, like C2, adjusts when you copy or move the formula, while an absolute reference remains fixed. You can also use mixed references, where either the row or the column is absolute and the other is relative. For example, $C2 would keep the column fixed, but allow the row to change. Understanding when to use relative and absolute references is key to working efficiently in Excel. Another important thing to know when working with formulas is error handling. Sometimes you might make a mistake, like trying to divide by 0. Excel will show an error message in the cell, often with hashtags or a division by 0 message. Excel will warn you about potential errors and, in some cases, offer suggestions to fix them. If you see an error, you can go to the formula bar and adjust the formula as needed to correct it. Finally, Excel allows you to name ranges of cells, which can make formulas easier to read and understand. For example, instead of referring to a range of cells like E2 through E10, you can select that range, go to the name box in the upper left corner and give it a name like taxable income. Then, in your formulas, you can refer to that range by its name instead of its cell references, making your formulas more intuitive. To name a range, simply select the cells, type the name in the name box, and hit Enter. You can use that name in your formulas, like equals taxable income times H1, instead of referencing individual cells. This makes it easier to understand what the formula is doing, especially as your spreadsheet grows in complexity. In the next segment, we will build on these foundational concepts by introducing more advanced functions and formulas in Excel. By mastering these basic principles, you'll be ready to tackle more complex data analysis tasks with confidence. In this next section of our Excel for Beginners course, we zero in on one of the most foundational ideas in spreadsheets: functions. A surprising number of people, even those who have spent years inside Excel, blend the words formula and function. And I've lost count of how many YouTube tutorials make the same slip-up. A formula is any expression that begins with an equal sign and returns a result, while a function is a built-in, named operation that you embed inside a formula to perform a specific job. The first function every new user learns is sum, and it really is the workhorse of Excel. Imagine that column D of our worksheet tracks hours worked for each employee, ending in row 14. I want a grand total in D15. I click D15, type the equal sign, and immediately start writing SU. Excel's IntelliSense pops up with a list of candidate functions: sum, SUMIF, SUMIFs, SUMPRODUCT, and more, with concise tooltips that explain each one. Because I simply need to add everything in a single range, I accept sum. Type an opening parentheses, and Excel's screen tip reminds me that the first argument should be a number, a range, or any numeric expression, followed by commas if I want multiple arguments. I could literally type 5,6, press Enter, and see 11. But real power comes from referencing cells. Ranges are described by their upper left cell, a colon, and their lower right cell, so the hour range is D2 through D14. After entering D2 through D14 and pressing Enter, Excel instantly returns the total hours. An alternate gesture is to type equals sum, then drag from D2 down to D14. Excel inserts the coordinates for me, and the result is identical. Because sum is so common, Microsoft added AutoSum. With D15 selected, I click the AutoSum button in the Editing group on the Home ribbon. Excel previews the same D2 through D14 range with a marching ants border. I press Enter, and the total appears. No typing required. A quick label such as totals in C15, bolded and right-aligned, makes the sheet easier to read, and dragging the little square in the lower right corner of D15 across to E15 copies the formula sideways. Because the references are relative, there are no dollar signs, Excel automatically changes the column letter and totals the taxable income numbers. Average works the same way. In D16, I type equals average, D2 through D14, and press Enter to see the mean hours per employee. Then AutoFill to E16 for mean taxable income. Named ranges make formulas even cleaner. Earlier, we defined E2 through E14 as taxable income. So in E15, I can write equals sum, taxable income, or equals average, taxable income. And Excel recognizes the name without any extra punctuation. To find extremes, I use max for the highest value and min for the lowest. Typing equals max D2 through D14 in D17 returns the largest hours figure, 165 in this example, and equals min D2 through D14 in D18 reveals the smallest. Copying those formulas to the right gives the corresponding highs and lows for taxable income and taxes owed. Finally, counting non-blank numeric cells is as easy as equals count D2 through D14 in D19, which tells me we have 13 employees. As you grow more comfortable, you'll unlock even stronger functions. Think SUMIF and its cousins, but also classics like VLOOKUP, XLOOKUP, and the index match combo. We'll explore several of these later in this course, while the truly advanced functions will get their own deep dive videos. So make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss those tutorials. And now let's head to the next section of this course. In this segment of our Excel for Beginners series, we're turning raw numbers into a picture anyone can understand. And that means building a basic chart straight from the payroll table already on screen. I begin by selecting only what tells the story. I click in B2 and drag down to B14 to capture every employee name. Then release the mouse, press Ctrl, and drag from F2 to F14, so the taxes owed figures join the highlight. Excel shows both blocks split up at once, confirming a non-adjacent range. With those two columns selected, one for labels, one for values, I head to the ribbon, click the Insert tab, and hover over the Charts group. Look for the icon that shows 3 vertical bars. That's the column chart gallery. A tooltip preview reveals column, line, pie, bar, and more. We'll dive into combo charts, scatter plots, and spark lines in the intermediate course. But for now, the clearest choice is a plain column chart. So I open the dropdown and pick Clustered Column. Clustered gives every employee a standalone bar, making heights directly comparable, whereas a stacked chart would pile values and hide the true ranking. Excel drops the chart onto the sheet with axes labeled automatically, and each employee standing behind a bar whose height matches the tax they owe. The moment the chart is selected, a new green Chart Design tab appears at the top. If you don't see it, click the chart border once. While that tab is active, I choose Add Chart Element. Click Chart Title, place it above Chart, triple-click the placeholder, and type Taxes Owed per Employee. I follow the same route to add Chart Element, Data Labels, Outside End, so the exact dollar amount purchased above every bar, eliminating mental arithmetic. Ranking employees from highest to lowest makes the message pop, so I click anywhere inside the source table, confirm I have a proper header row, employee, taxes owed, and so on, then switch to the Data tab and hit the big Filter button. Tiny arrows appear in each header. I open the arrow in the Taxes Owed column and choose Sort Largest to Smallest. The rows reshuffle instantly, and because the chart is linked live to the data, the bars reorder themselves automatically. Tallest now on the left, shortest on the right, turning the picture into a visual leaderboard. To give the graphic a page of its own, I return to Chart Design, click Move Chart, select New Sheet, name it Tax Chart, and press OK. The chart jumps onto a fresh tab ready for printing, emailing, or dropping into a slide deck. If you ever want it back on the original worksheet, choose Move Chart again. and select Object in Sheet 1. Now you know how to select the right columns, releasing and reselecting when ranges aren't side by side. Insert a clean clustered column chart, add titles and labels, rank the data with a quick filter sort, and park the finished graphic on its own sheet for easy sharing. With that skill locked in, let's head to the next section of the course. In this closing lesson of the Microsoft Excel for Beginners course, we finished crunching numbers and it's time to get our work out the door. So let's walk through every step that makes a worksheet look polished on paper or in PDF. Start by clicking File and then Print. The moment Print Preview appears on the right, flip through the tiny page thumbnails and notice what happens in the main pane. In my first path, the entire table sits on page 1. But the chart is sliced in half and its lower portion spills onto page 2, a clear sign something needs fixing. Jump to the Page Layout tab, open the Orientation drop-down, and switch from Portrait to Landscape. That single click often gives the sheet enough horizontal room to keep table and chart together. If the preview still shows 2 pages, head to the View tab, choose Page Break Preview, and look for the dashed blue borders that outline each printable page. Drag the vertical break to the right until both the table and the full chart sit inside one rectangle. And if any stray horizontal break creeps into the middle of your data, drag it below the last filled row. Press Escape or pick Normal View to go back, reopen Print, and you should now see the entire worksheet on one landscape page. Should you ever need to squeeze a big sheet into a single handout, say for a quick reference guide, click the scaling drop-down at the bottom of the print pane and choose Fit Sheet on one page. Excel will shrink everything proportionally, though keep in mind the text can get tiny if you're cramming thousands of rows. Next, decide what actually needs to print. By default, Excel sends the active sheet, but you can switch to Entire Workbook for multiple sheet reports, or pick Print Selection when you only want the main table and none of the extras, like the Employee ID column or the chart. To do that, highlight the exact range, reopen Print, set the option to Selection, and watch the preview update so you're sure you're not wasting paper. Once the content looks perfect, choose your printer. I'll select Microsoft Print to PDF because no physical printer is connected, but you could just as easily pick an Office Laser. Click Print, give the file a name, choose a save location, downloads is handy, and in seconds you have a crystal clear PDF that matches the preview pixel for pixel. If you'd rather share the workbook online, tap the Share button in the top right corner of Excel. Save the file to OneDrive when prompted, and copy the link that Excel generates so teammates can view or even edit in real time. For audiences that don't use OneDrive, fall back on File, Save As, and pick a format. The standard .xlsx for everyday edits, comma-separated, .csv when the data needs to land in a database for another app, or PDF when you want a locked-down snapshot that looks the same on every device. With those tools, orientation tweaks, page break preview, smart scaling, selective printing, PDF export, and easy sharing, every spreadsheet will be professional looking and ready to deliver every single time. That marks the end of our beginner journey. But before we wrap, let's talk about showing the world what you can do now. If you'd like to prove these new skills to hiring managers, or just dress up your LinkedIn profile with a shiny credential, check the link in the comments. There you'll find everything you need to sit for a short basics level exam. Pass it, and you'll instantly earn a share-worthy certificate that tells your employers you're more than spreadsheet curious, you're spreadsheet capable. And if you're ready to keep climbing, stay tuned. I'm currently building Excel for intermediate users. a follow-up course that dives into pivot tables, data cleanup superpowers, and time-saving automation. The moment it's finished, the thumbnail will pop up right here on screen. Click it and continue the journey.